homer, led the league in tackles with 85. The deep ball for Darius Prince, and Philadelphia's on the board first.
On the draw, this is Bryson Allen. And Allen weaving his way all the way down to the 22.
10-yard line, 5. Mayfield, dancing all around. Throw as far as he can throw it. Jump ball coming. Crazy stuff. Not this time.
And you want to be a wide receiver, you're going to have to take a little bit of a hit like that as Brown got him in that shoulder, but watch. Those are teeth.
Do we have a dentist on staff here?
We're back for another episode of Around the Indoor Football World, and for lack of a better term, this is going to be the championship episode. Just before we came on here, my co-host dropped off real quick, but he will be right back, I'm sure. He is on the road, on his way to Omaha to go ahead and be at this championship game to help bring you exclusive behind-the-scenes content with both coaches. So definitely stay tuned for all of his content coming from the championship game, and here he is. Ducon, how are you doing this morning, sir?
Doing great, Sam. How are you doing?
Doing great. Looking forward to another great episode. And like I just told our viewers, you are actually on your way to the NAL Championship game, are you not?
I am. I'm really excited about it.
Definitely.
Got the film gear ready, and we're going to film the whole thing, mic up the coaches, and hopefully in the next week or two, release a cinematic recap of the NAL Championship.
Definitely. Well, I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be very interesting to hear and see what you come up with. I mean, a big part of the reason why I always want to work with you is your editing talent. I mean, you're so awesome at putting those videos together, making them entertaining, funny, just a great, overall viewing experience. So I can only imagine it's going to be a very interesting take on the championship game. So looking forward to that for sure. But we're going to actually kick this off with another championship game that just happened last night. I really like the fact that these two games didn't overlap for the AIF and the NAL. I don't know if that was by design or if that's how it fell. But last night, the championship game between the Corpus Christi Tritons and the Columbus Lions took place in the American Indoor Football League, and it turned into a little bit of a blowout. But from what I saw at first, it was fairly close to begin with. Columbus did kind of start to walk away with it. Do you have any takes from this game in particular? Were you surprised by the overall outcome?
I wasn't surprised at the overall outcome. In fact, it ended probably exactly how I thought it would. But I have a lot of respect for the Corpus Christi Tritons. I think they've got a good thing down there and a really good team. And when the third quarter rolled around, their defense really stepped up. They had forced Columbus to turn the ball over on downs twice in a row. They were down 28-6 at halftime, but by the end of the third quarter, it was 28-20, and they looked like they had momentum. They looked like they really could have just made it into a really, really good game. But fourth quarter, Columbus showed who they were. They showed that they're a championship product, that they have the depth that they need, and really, my hat's off to Damian Daniels. I just think he's a solid coach, and I think he knew how to pull the guys in, rein them in at their most frustrating moments, and say, guys, we're a championship team. Let's play like it. Let's act like it. Let's have some dignity, and let's go and ball out. And they turned it up. That fourth quarter was quite something for the Lions. So very entertaining game from the little bit that I did see. And I just have the utmost respect for both teams.
Definitely. I mean, obviously, you never necessarily want to end up seeing a championship game, end as a blowout. But let's be honest, the Columbus Lions are on another level. I mean, they are easily one of the best and well-run teams in all of the indoor football leagues, regardless of what the shield is and what the league name may be. That's why they've existed for so long. They're very well run. You know, they're very good at assembling talented rosters year in and year out. And it definitely doesn't hurt when you have a guy like Marcus Brooks leading the show. So, you know, he had a great performance once again, typical for him. You know, ultimately threw 6 touchdown passes, had 29 passing attempts, 16 completions, only threw 1 interception. The run game on both sides was kind of non-existent in this game, but that didn't keep it from being a very high-scoring game with 66 points scored. Ultimately, you know, an awesome game, awesome performance by both teams. I'm kind of curious to see what the future holds for the AIF. I mean, ultimately, I feel like despite the fact that they had the issues early on in the season, it ultimately ended up being fairly stable there toward the end with the teams that remained, you know, Harrisburg, Corpus Christi, Columbus. You know, a lot of these teams were, very stable, well run. You didn't have very many questions about what was going on behind the scenes. But what was your take on the overall success now that the dust has kind of settled on the AIF season?
Well, you know, it's always nice when I'll just call it a new league because it is, even though there's been previous iterations of the AIF. It's always nice when you see them complete the season. It's always hard when you see them end up with half the teams they started with. That's the downside of this. But ultimately, they did what needed to be done to finish the season, to have a nice championship game. It's always nice to see. And as far as the franchises that you mentioned, I just think that there's a lot of upside. Of course, Columbus is just next level, and they've been around. They're one of the longest running franchises in the industry. And, they had a season last year where they considered just not playing that year. But my hat's off to them, and they made the sacrifice and just played because you want to be consistent, and they've shown that they're a consistent franchise that puts out a good quality product. But Corpus Christi and Harrisburg are 2 franchises that I see going places. They're new, and they're getting their feet wet. And they managed to go through a whole year. You know, I was told by Ricky Burtz, who's the executive of the year in the NAL, he just got awarded that. I was told that these franchises, they have the biggest growth in year 2. Year 1, they're getting their feet wet. They make all these kinds of mistakes and different things like that. And if they can stick around and go for year 2, that's when they make the biggest growth. So I'm really excited to see where they end up, if it's going to be AIF or if they're going to go some other place. But regardless of where they end up, I'm excited to see how much their product improves.
Agreed. I know there's a couple questions about Amarillo going forward, but I hope that they also stick around. I thought they put a decent product on the field. I thought that they did an overwhelmingly good job getting their games in front of fans, which I think is very important when you're trying to grow a league and grow a brand like that. But yeah, let's kind of segue right into the NAL, because obviously the big speculation here is that a lot of these teams could end up in the National Arena League next season. Teams like Columbus, who could potentially make their return to the NAL. A Harrisburg Stampede would make some sense. Corpus Christi Tritons, Amarillo Venom, Beaumont Renegades. I know, inquired about the NAL this past season. So let's go ahead and start there before we get into the championship game. Do you see a situation where we could see essentially a pseudo merger between the AIF and the NAL?
Yeah, I can see it. I could see it happening. I don't think that the NAL would want to consider it a merger, but you did use the word pseudo merger. Yeah, I could see that happening. You know, the AIF again, it's new and new people and trying to figure out the industry and everything, and that can be frustrating to teams that have been around for a while, or to just new teams that think that they can do better. I do think that I would like to see the NAL pick up some of these teams, but I don't mean any disrespect to the AIF and what they've got going in saying that. Now, I just think that the brand National Arena League sounds really cool, and to have an actual bona fide national footprint would be absolutely amazing. Would I like to see a team like Columbus go to the NAL? Yes. I love, that's when I discovered Columbus, is when they were in the NAL. But I also understand, I'm pretty good friends with the owners down there, and I understand their reasons for things. I understand, so their circumstances. And if it makes sense to the teams to do it, I think it's the best thing for them to do, to be honest. But I do think that the NAL has a specific standard. To give an idea, I think that Harrisburg might have to have some field adjustments or a different arena in order to basically be, I guess, approved to go into the NAL. Or Corpus Christi, I think, could very much so. I don't know enough about Beaumont. You'd probably have to educate me on that one. But I can totally see the NAL being very willing to, I guess, solicit some of these teams if they were interested. However, I think that there's enough interest in the NAL from different teams that they're going to have to be very, very picky and not grow too fast. For example, the NAL finishes with 5 teams this year. The original schedule showed that they had 8. Of course, they saw doom and gloom with a couple franchises, so removed them from the schedule before the season started to avoid anything happening middle of the season. And then the Oklahoma Flying Aces going dormant mid-season, and having to have a big schedule adjustment. Things just kind of made it a little bit confusing for the NAL. So to go from 5 teams to say 10, you're doubling the busyness of the NAL staff. And if a team is not already stable and have their operations down, then I don't see the NAL being that interested in growing too fast. If it's just a couple of teams that just kind of need a little bit of help, then I can see them doing that. But 5-6 teams max, if the NAL was to expand, I don't see them expanding too fast.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, 5 to 6 teams. AIF. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, when I say a merge, I could definitely see a situation where not every team goes. Maybe they take specific teams because they're more established or they've got better infrastructure in place. But at the same time, it would still probably be under the NAL flag, NAL brand. Maybe it's a situation where we see a similar thing to, say, the UFL, where you have an AIF division and an NAL division, or an American division and a national division, kind of like the NFL, I guess, would be a better example there. And ultimately, you play under the National Arena League brand. I could definitely see something like that. I don't know if they would do that to kind of placate to the AIF group, but I could definitely see a scenario where these 2 leagues coming together and making an agreement, even if it's not a merger. Maybe it's interleague games that count for standings. Maybe it's something of that state. But I could see these leagues coming together and seeing a mutually beneficial situation, especially if both leagues somehow end up staying at 5 teams apiece. I mean, I'm not real good at math, but 5 plus 5 is 10, and that's a pretty good number for a league. So, I definitely think that would be a good arrangement. Although I fully anticipate that some of these AFL teams will inquire about other leagues as well. as far as we've talked about in the past, there aren't really league affiliation agreements, or weren't really league affiliation agreements in place with the old ownership group of the AFL. I'm assuming that the new ownership group will pursue to, change that, but I don't know that they're in place yet. And if that's the case, then I could see some of these teams inquiring about, leagues that aren't maybe asking for as much operating costs up front. Let's put it that way. So, I could see a team like maybe a Wichita Regulators, or, maybe even Orlando. Orlando tries to jump back into the NAL or something like that. But maybe Albany. That would be interesting for sure. Can you see any other teams other than AIF teams jumping in? Is there any teams that stand out?
I mean, the biggest one obviously is Columbus. Having played in the NAL before, having had success in the NAL before, and they've gone to 3 championships. They were a charter team of the NAL. I can totally see them going to the NAL at this point. That's just me speculating, of course. And it's also something that I'd like to see. One of the reasons, just because you got Carolina, Carolina was on an island this last year, and when they had to travel a long distance, and it affected their play. Because when you look at Carolina and how they played at home, they won. They had one loss, that was the Omaha Beef, who never loses. So, but all other games they won at home, and they did it pretty soundly in a lot of cases. Even though Colorado kind of gave them a little bit of a run at times, they blew out Idaho. They blew out Sioux City, who's in the championship. So Carolina was great at home, but you look at how they played when they went to Sioux City. They lost 62-35 to Sioux City and 54-31 to Omaha. They barely squeaked a win out of Idaho by 2 points when Idaho finished 1-7, and Colorado beat them by 17. So the travel was a huge factor on the gameplay. Columbus going to the NAL makes a lot of sense for both Columbus and Carolina and the NAL. And I'm going to throw another one at you, Sam, if that's okay. This is just something I'd like to see. And half your viewers are going to scoff at me, but that's okay. I would like to see Bob Twaddle, having had the experience of not managing the money right and not getting enough sponsorships and whatnot in Fayetteville, bring the Mustangs back to the NAL and have a North Carolina rivalry with the Cobras as well.
That would be great. We're talking about regional travel.
Yeah, and I know that's not according to your question. It was specifically about the AIF, but Columbus definitely, I think, would be the most likely to go to the NAL in my mind. But the second, I think, would probably be Corpus Christi if another Texas team comes along, because Corpus Christi is clear down at the bottom of Texas, and that's a big state. You any one of those teams that they play, that's a lot of travel, and I just don't see it being fiscally responsible of them to be NAL unless they have a closer partner to play against.
That's completely fair, for sure. When I look outside the AIF, or when I look in the AIF, obviously Columbus makes a lot of sense as far as a team that you would want to quote unquote target if you're the NAL, because obviously they've been there, done that. They have a lot of experience in helping run the league and making sure it's up and running in the proper fashion. So why not bring a team like that in? They're strong playing partners. Corpus Christi, like you said, they're very far from a lot of these teams, so that's definitely a factor. But if you can bring in a team like Amarillo, or and perhaps Beaumont as well, suddenly you have 3 Texas teams. You have a little bit more regional play there. If you can bring back a Fayetteville, then you have North Carolina. You've got Fayetteville. Maybe bring in a team like Wheeling. You have another somewhat Eastern team. all of a sudden that National Arena League name and brand is starting to make a little bit more sense. You've got a little bit bigger footprint. You are starting to reach more nationally. And honestly, I think that might be the best way for the NAL to kind of regrow their image and get back to the point where they once were, where they were the, basically for the arena football realm, they were the premier league in that instance. But that would be another question. I mean, with the AFL going away from arena rules, do you see us ever being in a situation where we see a league go back to primarily arena rules at this level in terms of like an NAL, an IFL, AIF, or AFL style league?
That's a very good question, Sam. It's kind of an interesting mix over there right now. But I think there's a lot of advocates for the arena style of play. And when I say that, the rebound nets and the Ironman football and the one guy in motion rather than two, something that caters more to a pass game than a run game. Those types of rules. There are a lot of advocates out there, like people that used to play in the AFL back in its glory days that are just like, hey, we want to bring this back. So I think that there's still going to be a push to have that, but it's almost like, you and I, we're not like our grandpas. We're a couple generations different, and it just seems like a new era to where most people are just really liking the indoor style of play. I do see that if the AFL is able to continue for a while, I can totally see, I guess, the people in the AFL saying, hey, let's stay true to the AFL brand and the AFL history and keep the arena rules alive. I'd say that they would be the front runners of sticking with that style of play, but that's just my opinion.
No, I would completely agree on that. If they're not all of a sudden have to start asking the question about seeing it at the professional level at a widespread manner. I know the American Arena League still plays primarily arena style rules, although I don't believe they're playing Ironman, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know. I think they have to sometimes because of how small their teams are sometimes. But
that's true.
I don't know if they implement the Ironman rules. They just have their players kind of play in Ironman style.
That makes sense. Real quick before we move on to the IFL, I'm going to play a quick commercial and then we will be right back.
Follow your passion first. First. It's the most fun thing in the world. You get up in the morning excited about what you're doing. And you got to be really honest with yourself about it. And you got to sit there and ask yourself, okay, what am I truly passionate about? What do I enjoy doing?
This is a Huddle Sports Network broadcast. You can find us on Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, Facebook, and of course YouTube. Get all your NFL news here first.
All right. So thank you for our partner. It's the Huddle Sports Network that is streaming this show on Roku later on this afternoon. We really appreciate that and the exposure for the show. Also, shout out to American Angel Radio in Indiana for broadcasting it on radio as well. We're in the big time now, boys. It's nice and fun.
Thank you, guys.
Definitely. No, so anyway, moving on to the championship game for the National Arena League. Obviously, tonight we get to witness another installment of the infamous rivalry from the CIF days. When I look at this game, obviously we talked about it briefly here. You said Omaha rarely loses, so I feel like I have an idea where you're leaning in this game. But I mean, if you look at this game overall, do you think it's just going to be Omaha all the way, or is there the potential for Sioux City to kind of, for lack of a better term, slay the giant here?
Oh man, great question, Sam. Tell you a really quick funny story. So I've only been to one Omaha Beef game in my life, and that was the last time they lost. Champions Bowl 7 in Salina, and Salina beat them. And I reached out to Ricky about getting a media pass to come to Omaha this weekend, you know, and be able to film the game. And his response was, "Hell no! Last time you came to a Beef game, they lost." So he wasn't about to give me a media pass, but of course he said, "Just kidding. Yes, I'll get you one." If you believe in stuff like the Madden curse, if you want to speculate and go there, then if I keep this Sioux City hat on and show up to the game, you know, it's possible the Beef go weak in their knees. Obviously, I'm kidding. That's not a factor. In sincerity, I think that the Beef have the best depth. If you saw my breakdown video, you'll see that when you compare the defense, the Beef have 17 turnovers to the Bandits 9 and 17 sacks to the Bandits 9 on the year. And the Bandits averaged 47.2 points per game against NAL opponents that weren't the Beef. But against the Beef, they averaged 19 points per game. So for whatever reason, the Beef defense just knows how to shut them down. However, since the last visit that the Bandits went to in Omaha and lost 33-6, they revamped their offense. They've scored 32, 56, and 62. The Bandits are the only team to eclipse 60 points twice this season in the NAL. And I agree, Chris, he's amazing. Except for I'd like to see him continue to be the defensive coordinator in Sioux City. If they can continue their offensive success, which kind of seems resurgent when you look at how Sioux City played against Carolina this last time, they were playing with passion and energy, and it's like they moved faster than they ever have all year. And they also managed to, when I say that the Bandits have had 9 sacks this season, 4 of those came in just their last game. They got Ben Peaster back, and Juan Moore is healthy. He had 2 sacks and a fumble forced, and Ben Peaster had a sack, and he knocked a couple balls down at the line of scrimmage. These guys were night and day difference from the Sioux City Bandits that went down to Omaha the first time. So I would not be one bit surprised if the Sioux City Bandits beat the Beef and it would be the Beef's first loss in 2 years. But I also wouldn't be one bit surprised if the Beef just came and won the thing. I'm not going to give you a prediction. I think that the Beef have more depth and a stouter defense, and we all know defense wins championships. But there's something about the offense right now on Sioux City that makes me think that this could be a high-scoring match, a back-and-forth classic.
That's exactly what I anticipate in this game. I've also noticed that over the past couple weeks, Sioux City and Omaha have both made some very interesting moves, bringing in some rather large names. If you followed the CIF, Jeff Luke has signed with Omaha to add some depth to that defensive line. You just touched on the depth. And like Omaha needed any more playmakers on that team, they go ahead and bring
I
in
did not know this, Sam.
linemen.
This is whoa. Okay,
And
that's
then
why you're in this industry.
Rashad Ridley, wide receiver, formerly with multiple teams. I think he was with Gillette at one point. I think he played with Topeka for a little while. Don't quote me on that.
He was Oklahoma Flying Aces this year. Had a couple of
That's right.
returns for touchdowns. He was one of the top returners before they went dormant.
Well, he's now with Sioux City. So
Wow.
some interesting moves on both sides of this game here, and I think it adds like an extra wrinkle to the championship game that could make it even more interesting. Ridley's always good for some explosive plays. Luke's always good for some solid defensive plays, but I still think that Omaha is going to be really, really tough to beat for any team in this league, for any team in any league, really. So I have a hard time betting against them in this one, but we'll see. We'll see. It's going to be a great game either way. I firmly encourage anybody, if you have not caught an NAL game all season long, this is the one to catch. It's the I-29 rivalry, right?
The I-29 rivalry, yeah. And I want to insert something here, Sam. Tommy Armstrong, he just won the MVP, and it's well deserved. He had 19 rushing touchdowns, 19 passing touchdowns, and only 3 interceptions all year. The guys are really good at running the read option. It's a toss-up between him and Jerome Johnson of the Vegas Nighthawks as to who runs the read option the best in the industry. But both of these guys are so good at it. They read that D end so well that they just know when to pull it and when to let it go. And the thing I'm noticing about Armstrong, too, is when a defense does key in on that read option and is able to stop it, he's Armstrong with a strong arm. I mean, he actually has that dual ability to sling it. And that alone, I think, just makes it very, very hard for Sioux City to defend against. But one of the things I'm noticing on Sioux City is their run game. And if they've added Rashad Ridley to this, they've added more speed. And I think that when it comes to speed, jet sweeps and mixing in, different run plays and stuff like that, and the special teams of the Sioux City Bandits, if you saw the stats, even though Omaha is 8-0, they've had 33 kick returns for 479 yards. Sioux City's had 42 kick returns for 833 yards and 4 touchdowns. Omaha has not had a return. Now you add Rashad Ridley to it. What I'm trying to get at is, even though Omaha's defense is sensational, and even though Sioux City's offense is sensational, if this game was so tight that it came down to a special teams play, either Paul Ortiz of Omaha is going to have a game-winning kick, or Sioux City's going to have a kick return or something that changes the game. That's how close I think this is going to be.
Hey, it would be pretty sweet to see a walk-off kick return touchdown, something like that, in the last seconds. But definitely interesting game coming up tonight. So I dropped that in the comments. The link for the game tonight is 5:30 Mountain Time, 6:30 Central, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you tune into the game. I guarantee you will not be disappointed. Should be one of the best games of the year. Real quick before we move on to the IFL, I wanted to touch on the awards that you just mentioned. Most valuable player went to Tommy Armstrong. I don't think anybody is surprised by that particular move. Head coach of the year went to Brandon Negron, and you can correct me on this if I incorrectly speak, but I think this might be the first time that a coach has ever won assistant coach of the year and then head coach of the year in successive years. I could be wrong. Anybody in the comments, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I've never seen that happen before. Or at least I don't recall it happening in the past. Offensive player of the year goes to Jason Whitaker with Colorado Spartans. You could make a case for so many different players in this position, and I don't mean to throw any shade at Jay Witt. Obviously, great quarterback, Colorado Spartans, so I'm glad that he won the award. But, Guy Myers, Tommy Armstrong both have very strong cases to be Offensive Player of the Year. And I think one of the reasons Tommy Armstrong didn't get it is because he got MVP. So you want to kind of distribute the awards. So give this one to Whitaker, the NAL rookie as well. So kind of cool to see. Defensive Player of the Year, Rashad Flanders, Idaho Horsemen. Special Teams Player of the Year, Kevin Didio Weber, Carolina Cobras. Offensive Rookie of the Year, Stephen Newbold Jr. It's funny seeing Stephen Newbold Jr. win an Offensive Rookie of the Year award because obviously he played in the IFL for multiple years and was dominant over there. But technically he is an NAL rookie. So, he wins the award. He's very deserving. I believe he led the league in reception touchdowns, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Defensive Rookie of the Year, Javaris Thompson. As Coach Brooks used to call him, Jay Twomp. Definitely pretty solid rookie year for him. Looks like a promising young player going forward if he's not outdoors by next season. Franchise of the Year, Omaha Beef. Obviously makes perfect sense. They're very, very well run. We were actually harping on that behind the scenes before we got live on here. Mascot of the Year, Sirloin. Great pick. I think that's honestly, had we picked anybody else, I'd have to kind of question it a little bit. Colorado Spartans, best dance team. Executive of the Year, as mentioned before, Ricky Burtz. Best game day operations, Sioux City Bandits. Best media relations, Sioux City Bandits. Best community relations, Carolina Cobras. And best fan base, Omaha Beef. You could make an argument for some of these awards, but I don't see anything on that list that's egregious. Not one name on it is undeserving of the award that they won. So I will say that. I know some people might have a different opinion. If you do, let us know. I'm curious of your opinion. Who do you think deserves those awards that were divvied out yesterday? Is there a coach that you think deserves it? Is there an offensive player, defensive player? Let us know. I'm curious of your thoughts. But we're going to go ahead and move on. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that, I think the NAL did a pretty good job of it. But one thing I'd like to see in the future from the NAL and other leagues is actually I don't know what you'd call it, the Do It All Award, or I just call it the Do It All Award. In other words, when you have guys like Stephen Newbold who lead the league in touchdown receptions and also lead the league in kickoff return average, tied for the lead league in kick returns for touchdowns, and he decided to play defense the last couple games and got a couple picks. And when Rashad Flanders leads the league in interceptions, but he's having kick returns for touchdowns. He's also having rushing touchdowns, receiving touchdowns on the offense. And even he was asked to do kicking duties the last game at Colorado. You look at guys like that, and I'd like to see us acknowledge that these guys are athletes and that they can jump in at any time to fill any role and do well at it. That's the impressive part, because Stephen Newbold's just like, hey, I'll help on defense, sure. And he comes in there and gets a couple picks, 2 picks in 2 games, an instant contributor. And Rashad Flanders, same thing. It would be cool. And I got to mention Braden Mines as well from Sioux City. They call him the Swiss Army knife. He's handling all their kicking duties, but he's a linebacker. He's also a running back. He's also a tight end. He's doing everything. And I think that it would be cool if these leagues would start to put an award out there that acknowledges this type of athlete. That's just like, I will contribute in any way I possibly can, and I will do well at it.
I couldn't echo that anymore if I tried. That's a great idea. Every league should have that award. Doesn't matter what level. You see players kind of just be a team guy at every single level, whether it's the IFL all the way to the NFL. I think every single league should always have an award that kind of honors those players, because without players like that, some teams wouldn't be able to make it through games. You talked about Rashad Flanders handling the kicking duties for Idaho. That's their 3rd kicker they've had this season alone. So, I mean, that's a perfect example. You know, he stepped up when needed because they had no other choice. And there you go. You know, he stepped in and managed to handle the duties, but Mr. Versatile is right. But, you know, I definitely think that be a great award to have. And maybe we should see what we have, what power we have behind the scenes to kind of try and get some leagues to institute that, because I think it would be a really good idea. So, you know, AIF, NAL, IFL, if you happen to be listening, take that into account. I really think that'd be a good idea. You know, there's players like that in every single league, especially all these indoor leagues.
Can I mention one other?
Yeah, go for it.
So when I guess it was mid-season, I went to Sioux City and filmed a game, the Oklahoma Flying Aces at Sioux City. And there's this guy there that I had never heard of. And while I'm filming this game, he was impressing me right and left. He was returning kicks. He played running back. He played defensive back. He's hitting hard. He was everywhere for the Flying Aces. And anyway, so I'm going inquire, who is that guy? Oh, some guy named Hassan Muhammad, right? And the next game he plays, he goes up to Idaho and plays as the quarterback and does pretty darn good at it. And now he's in Duke City under the name Hassan Rogers. I think Chris had an interview with him recently. I was blown away at the athletic prowess of this individual. And I just think that we need to mention that this type of talent is rare, that they can step in any position at any time and be almost the best at it. It's just phenomenal to me.
Agreed. I did not know that was the same player. That's funny.
Yeah, it blew my mind too, because I saw that Duke City signed this Hassan Rogers guy, and then I started watching the Duke City game. I know we're getting into IFL now, but
that's perfect segue.
He comes in the Duke City game, and they've got this new quarterback playing on the road at San Antonio, and the dude's running around and he's slinging it, and I'm like, who's this Hassan Rogers guy? And then when I saw Chris's interview, I'm like, that's the same guy I videoed in Sioux City playing for Oklahoma, and he's just making waves. And I like his attitude too. That was what was cool to me, was that he's just like, I'm going to contribute in any way, I'm going to excel at it, and I'm going to have fun doing it. That was phenomenal.
Yeah, see, man, a lot of people look at me crooked when I say this, but I actually thoroughly enjoy indoor or arena football more than I enjoy outdoor football at this point, because of things like that.
That's why I like you, Sam.
That the people who play this sport have a dedication to it, especially indoors, that is next level. And I'm not trying to knock NFL players. Obviously, they spend their lives dedicated to football, but it takes a next level dedication to play for $300 a game, you know, for while you're working another job, while you're doing all these other things, because at that point you're really doing it for the love of the game or for the opportunity to move up to the next level. But those opportunities are few and far between. So you're really making a gamble on yourself and ultimately hoping that it pans out. And, you know, for a lot of players, it does. Don't get me wrong. For some players, it doesn't. And they end up career, you know, indoor guys, which is perfectly fine as well, because then they turn into their own legends in their own right. But it's definitely a thing where it's, you know, I think that's lost on people, that these guys are professional athletes, but they're not paid, you know, six figures to do this. So, you know, a lot of these guys are working jobs in the off season or while they're in season to make ends meet and support their families. And then they're going out and, you know, putting their body on the line every weekend for our entertainment. So, you know, I always try to thank the players for their sacrifice for that, because, you know, they're playing for basically peanuts at the end of the day. And I'm not trying to disparage any team owners. That is the nature of indoor football right now. I'm not saying that that's their fault. It's honestly, if it's anybody's fault, it's us, the fans. We need to be more supportive. We need to go to games. We need to spend our money to support these teams, buy merchandise, you know, all of that, because it all matters.
Yes.
So Chris wanted to throw in one comment. Before I have to run, I need to say this. Today is personal. Coach Manas is going to learn the hard way. We are not 6-5. We got a better team than that. Them being 5-5 is a reflection on their defense. Okay, Krish, we shall see, my friend. Going to be a great game today. He is, of course, talking about Mass versus San Antonio, which will take place later on this afternoon. But we wanted to go ahead and touch on some IFL transactions, which I thought were very interesting recently. You brought up one of them, Hassan Rogers, the quarterback, was brought in by Duke City, was not intended to be the starter immediately. Joe Manusco was there. However, Manusco got hurt, ended up paving the way for Hassan Rogers to step in and play and ultimately score 5 touchdowns. But he ends up stepping up in a big way. There was a couple other moves. Trey Johnson from Tucson was released, the offensive lineman. He's kind of a big name. Lacavius Daniel from Iowa was released. Jaquan Amos, a very recent CFL defensive back, was signed by Vegas. Keep an eye on him. He's going to be a great player. I'm sure everybody recently saw the drama that's going on with Shane McInnery all over social media. That's a situation I'm not even sure I want to touch, but that's interesting. Justin Rankin, that's a big name signing right there. Rankin returns to the IFL. And another one I wanted to point out, Antonio Wimbush to short-term IR. So some interesting moves there. Anything that sticks out to you over the past couple of weeks when it comes to IFL transactions and any players coming in recently?
Well, where is Rankin going?
Frisco. Yep.
Oh, the rich just got richer. Oh my
goodness. Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
Wow. Yeah, that run game. Whew. Obviously that one sticks out to me probably the most because Justin Rankin over the last 3 IFL seasons has been arguably the best running back. I know there's other names you could mention, but he's in the running for possibly the best running back in the IFL during the last 3 years. So that's a big one. Hassan Rogers, even though he's not known by very many people right now, Vegas, watch out. Don't sleep on this guy. Look at the film you've got on him. Do it again and again and again. If you want to get rid of your 3-game losing streak against a 1-9 team, don't sleep on this Hassan Rogers guy. That's a big one. I feel bad that Vegas has Antonio Wimbush on IR. I think he's been a huge contributor in that very dynamic and elusive offense. And I got a shout out to Coach Mike Davis. I think he calls a great offensive game. I think he's well aware of his personnel, and he just knows what to call and when to call it, and keeps defenses guessing. But I'm curious as to how he adjusts to not having Wimbush on the field.
I would agree.
Those are the ones that stand out.
I would definitely agree on that. I haven't looked at the depth chart for them, so I'm not sure who they brought in at running back or who they have there at the backup spot. One other signing that I wanted to point out was Jordan Bird, running back / wide receiver, who has come in to Duke City. Keep an eye on this kid as well. It might take him a week or two to really learn the indoor game, but he has some high motion experience. He was in camp with Toronto of the CFL, so he should kind of have some of those timing things down or have a jump on him. And then he was also with the Pittsburgh Steelers the year before, so very high-end wide receiver, running back type guy who can come in and perform. I think he might play a little bit more running back than he has in the past with the bigger teams that he's been with, so it should be interesting to see what Duke City does with him. We have a question here for you, Dukan. Dukan, where are you headed today? Are you visiting any friends? Matt Patton says.
I'm visiting my friend Matt Patton today. We're going to meet up in Omaha and get ready for this clash of I-29. It's pretty exciting.
Very nice. That's awesome. Glad to see that you guys are going to meet up and looking forward to the episode that comes after the fact. Like I said, I'm sure it's going to be a great one. When you're looking across the IFL right now, obviously the playoff picture is really taking shape at this point. Where do you see us falling? And I know this is a little far ahead, but for the championship game, do we see something, say, Green Bay, Bay Area? Is it Frisco, Vegas, Mass? Northern Arizona? Do we see Arizona overcome their struggles recently? I mean, what are you seeing so far?
Man, it's really hard because the West is wide open, in my opinion. But over the last few weeks, I think Green Bay has solidified themselves as the beast of the East. And to me, they're the most complete team. And if you would have told me at the beginning of the year that the Green Bay Blizzard were going to be the first team to clinch a playoff spot this year, I would have told you hell has to freeze over first. Well, I guess it has. Hell's frozen over. Green Bay punched the ticket to the playoffs last night, first in the IFL to do it this year. And when I watch them, they look like the most complete team, and their defense is just nuts. They're incredible how fast they move the ball. There were some hits last night that I thought DJ Stubbs of Jacksonville was going to be put in a hospital. But credit to him, he's tough. Anyway, as far as what I see the championship being right now, it could go any way in the West, okay? But I'm going to say Green Bay in the East. I'm saying in the West, I think we're going to have a toss-up between Bay Area and, even though they're on a skid right now, the Vegas Nighthawks. I think that the Nighthawks are going to get it together. The only loss that Bay Area has was at home against the Nighthawks, and it was not even close. So if they meet in the playoffs, I think that the Nighthawks are built to beat the Bay Area Panthers. And as of right now, I think that they will represent the West and actually host the NAL Championship against the Green Bay Blizzard.
Well, that would be an interesting storyline. I'm kind of hoping it does happen because of the home field advantage aspect. I mean, I think that would be very interesting to watch. Watch the game and see how the fans respond to that. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's been interesting to see what's gone on with Vegas. If I'm not mistaken, they've lost 3 of the last 4 since beating Bay Area. So they're having an interesting slide right now, and I think part of that is Antonio Wimbush, getting hurt, big time performer. But like you said, Jerome Johnson, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, so I'm sure they'll get it back under control and manage to find their way to the championship game. Crazy to see how much things have changed in only a month's time. Just a month ago, Vegas was the last undefeated team. Now they're in second place in the West, and 2 teams stand ahead of them, or 3 teams stand ahead of them in the records. So kind of crazy.
Yeah, they're actually third place in the West because of the head-to-head matchup against NAS. Actually, I could be wrong. I think the IFL, correct me on this if I'm wrong, Sam. The IFL's playoff criteria, I think, is that conference record comes before head-to-head record. Is that correct? I don't know.
Let me double check before I misspeak.
If it is conference record, I think you're right. I think Vegas would be second place at 7-3, above NAS at 7-3. But NAS has beat Vegas. So if it is head-to-head, I think NAS is second place right now, and Vegas would take third. However, the losses that NAS has had, they lost by 1 point in overtime at Tucson, and they lost by 6 points in overtime. That's Sioux Falls. And the only other loss they had was at home by 1 score to NAS without Jerome Johnson in the game. So they haven't been playing at their full health. And because I went to a game of theirs earlier and was just blown away by the product and how complete that team is. Like I said, if they get healthy, I think they're the best in the West when they're healthy. That's how I see it.
I would agree. And just to reiterate, first obvious tiebreaker for playoff scenarios is win-loss percentage. Then it's highest conference win percentage, as you mentioned. Head-to-head record is next. Opponent's win percentage or strength of schedule, it's also known as, is the next factor. Head-to-head point differential versus opponent involved in a tie. That's a little over my head there. Point differential for the season, total points scored minus total points allowed. So little multiple, a bunch of different factors there that can kind of weigh in on the playoff ties. So IFL definitely has it figured out to try and make sure there is absolutely no possibility of a tie.
Right.
So definitely, like I said, interesting to see how everything's fallen in the IFL with the standings as of late. Arizona at first was kind of slipping. They didn't really have a chance, it looked like. And now they're only a game out of second place, basically at 7-4. Vegas, like we mentioned, 3 of 4 game slide. They're now 7-3. Northern Arizona has continued to just win games. It seems like they're really scrappy this year. They're going to be in the playoff hunt for sure. Bay Area, despite the loss to Vegas, which very well could have broken that team, they've continued to win. They've continued to put away opponents that they should have. There's a lot to be said about that. Green Bay, like you said, first team to clinch playoffs. I would have been shocked if somebody had told me week 1, hey, Green Bay is going to be 10-1 and they're going to be the top team in the East by, week 11 or week 12. I would have laughed at them. Like you said, I would have, hell would have had to have frozen over because they haven't even been a playoff team the past couple of years. But credit to Max Maylor, who's playing like an MVP candidate. Man, he's been great recently, but I just never expected to ultimately see that. And I mean, no disrespect to Green Bay. It's just been many years of watching them just barely be good enough to compete, but not quite have a winning record. And here we are with them, one of the top teams in the league.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned that, Sam, because when you look at, say, the NAL, sitting at 5 teams right now, and you start to look at the IFL sitting at 16 teams. If you have a champion in the NAL, although they are very, very good, it's probably not as good as a champion in the IFL because of the amount of teams. And I was actually in the off season feeling really, really bad for Green Bay because there's more and more stout teams that just keep coming in and coming in and coming in. And I kept thinking, man, are the Green Bay Blizzard ever going to get to a championship in the IFL with more good teams coming in? And that could be said for a lot of these teams that aren't doing very well right now. It's a great league to be in. It's, they have a polished image and do almost everything right as far as the way that they execute their league and everything. However, teams that just don't perform well, they look like they'll never get to a championship. And Green Bay has defied all odds so far. They've made believers out of me. But there's one other thing I want to mention, Sam, before we move on, if that's okay. And that is this. You have currently in the East a 5-5 team that's in 4th place and is a playoff team. But in the West, you also have a 5-5 team that's in 6th place and is not a playoff team. You have the 5th place team in the East. The 5th place team in the East has 3 wins. The 5th place team in the West has double those amount of wins. So it's crazy to me how stacked the Western Conference is. And I'm very, very curious how things would look if you took a team like Tucson and faced them against, say, Quad City, or Duke City against Quad City. Does the record that Tucson and Duke City actually reflect how good or bad they are, considering most of their opponents are these juggernauts in the West? It's just such a stout conference.
That's actually a really good point. San Antonio has one of the most talented rosters I've seen in a long time, and easily one of the best coaching staffs in the league. And I mean no disrespect to any other team. I mean, you look at that coaching staff, it's literally a staff full of head coaches.
Yes.
So for them to be 5-5 should tell you exactly how talented and how deep this conference really is. Because, like we said, we've got Bay Area 9-1, Vegas 7-3, Northern Arizona 7-3, Arizona 7-4. San Diego was on a roll early in the season. They've kind of started to slide back a little bit, but they're 6-5. San Antonio, really talented team, 5-5, and they're sixth in their own conference. That's insanity.
And one thing to mention here too is even though San Diego's sitting at 6-5 in fifth place, every single one of their losses by one score, every single one. And two of those games are a missed field goal as time expires. One of those games was because they went for two instead of tried the extra point that would have tied it. I mean, San Diego could just as easily be 9-2 as they could be 6-5 right now.
100%. And one of the things that's really interesting to look at, if you look at the losses in this division, the vast majority have come up against teams in their own conference. Bay Area's only loss came to Vegas. Two of Vegas's losses came to West teams. All three of Northern Arizona's losses have come against West teams. Arizona, same thing, all of their losses. San Diego, all but one. San Antonio, all but one. Tucson, all of their losses. Duke City, all but one. So, I mean, it's incredibly interesting to see how these teams are kind of cannibalizing each other. And I'm very curious, like you said, I'd be curious to see if Tucson and Duke City were somehow moved to the Eastern Conference and see how they would compete in that conference.
Yeah.
But, that could change a lot for both of those teams, especially it could change a lot, if you saw a team like Green Bay moved over to the West, so who knows? Who knows? Interesting to see how it's all shaken out this year. Obviously, this is a little early as well, but I wanted to ask, when we're looking at year-end awards, in terms of, like MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Special Teams Player of the Year, who's sticking out for like, say, MVP right off the top of your head? Is it a guy like, Sam Castronova immediately? Or is, Joshua Jones, Max Maylor, Nate Davis, are these guys that are also in the conversation for you as well?
I think they're all in the conversation. But for me right now, it's a toss-up between Sam Castronova and Jerome Johnson. He missed a couple games because of injury. But when Jerome Johnson's on the field, defenses can't play him. I mean, I think there was 3 straight games that Vegas had where defenses did not stop them once. And that's when Jerome Johnson was completely healthy. They had a healthy offense. He's running the read option like he could do it in his sleep. But Sam Castronova, he's on pace to breaking the IFL record for most touchdown passes in a season, and he can get it done with his legs. So he's also a dual threat quarterback, the Italian Stallions, what they call him. Very good talent, So either one of those guys, I think, are the front runners for me. But I'm impressed with guys like Joshua Jones, Max Maylor. Nate Davis is always a factor to deal with. It's just these other guys seem to be a little bit more mobile, and the dual threat that fits this IFL model or the indoor rules better. Nate Davis, if you notice him, every game he's got a knee brace on, and I credit him for sometimes taking off and running too, but he's just not healthy on that knee, yet he still gets the job done. So really, any of them could get it, but again, either Sam Castronova or Jerome Johnson for me.
I would agree there. I definitely think Max Maylor should receive some votes, but I don't think he'll have enough to quite overcome Castronova, especially if San Antonio is able to kind of put together a win streak here and close out the season with a winning record. it depends on how much winning record matters to you in the MVP race. I know, we've had that conversation in our group chat, our network group chat, and one of our guys, Michael Washington, is very strongly believing in the fact that Max Maylor should deserve to win the award because of his, Max Maylor or Jerome Johnson, due to their roles on winning teams. So he's a firm believer that winning should be a big factor in MVP. So looking at offensive player of the year, looking at other positions, not necessarily just quarterbacks, outside of guys like Naquan Murray, Arthur Jackson III, Alexis Rosario, Caleb Hawley, Jimmy Robinson, who are you looking at for offensive player of the year?
Yeah, Jimmy Robinson's a big one for me. Naquan Murray's a big one for me. I think one of the ones that you didn't mention is Shane Simpson of Bay Area. He's having a very, very good year and is extremely versatile. There's a couple others that I think should at least be part of the conversation. I think that you mentioned Arthur Jackson, and I think he's an absolute playmaker. I think he should definitely be part of that conversation. You had a guy on here. I'm trying to remember if I can pronounce his name right. He's been a little quiet lately, but early on in the year, he was amazing. Isaiah McCorker of NAS. If you can get him going again, I think he might be in that conversation too. But the sky's the limit. Kali Rashad, that's another guy. Kali Rashad out of San Antonio. He's been on fire lately offensively, and I think he too should be part of that conversation.
Agreed. And one thing I wanted to point out, and I'm sure you can see this on the screen right now, Naquan Murray, Arthur Jackson have both only played in 8 games. Both have 16 touchdowns. That should be taken into consideration what they would be able to do if they had played in every game. We might see both of these guys over 20 touchdowns right now from the receiver position. And in particular, Arthur Jackson, he's not the only target in San Diego. Nate Davis likes to spread the ball around. He's only had 31 receptions, 16 touchdowns. That's incredibly impressive. When you're looking at defensive player of the year, who stands out for you on the defensive side?
Oh man, there's so many guys to mention. Riveris Rivers of Green Bay. He stands out. The guy is playing some outstanding ball right now. Amin Black in Sioux Falls. He's playing really, really solid. Man, there's a lot of guys I could mention. I'll just throw a few names out there as guys that have just kind of stood out to me, I guess. Jaquan Artis in San Diego. Though his numbers aren't huge, he affects the backfield a lot. He affects what a quarterback or a running back or a receiver on a jet sweep is going to do. Other players that really stand out. Calvin Bundage of Mass. I think he's a solid defender. He's been playing great. And Lionel McConnell of Frisco. Not just for his defensive skills, but he's contributed on offense and special teams. San Diego had the Frisco Fighters beat. They had them beat, and Lionel McConnell takes a kickoff return for a touchdown on the road. Basically, his time expires. It hasn't quite expired, but he's just a great player all around. Those are just a few names that jump out, and I'm sure I'm missing some guys. There's some great ones out there. Believe it or not, Duke City, even at 1-9, they've had a solid defense. They've been in games. Their offense just hasn't been able to keep up. got Jason Serta down there, and oh, what's the dude's name? Another Jackson kid.
Aaron Jackson?
Aaron Jackson plays solid ball. Anyway, those are just a few names. You probably know more than I do, but who stands out to you?
Well, I mean, you named a lot of them. Lionel McConnell. That's definitely one of my guys on this list. Obviously, 6 interceptions, tied for the league lead. Clifton Duck, if he continues his run with San Antonio right now, 4 interceptions in 5 games, he definitely deserves consideration. I don't know if he'll play enough of the season in order to be strongly considered. Same thing with like a Eugene Ford, James Caesar. These guys have done a lot in a little amount of time. I don't know if it's enough, in such a little amount of time, but a guy like Mikel Calhoun from Vegas, 5 sacks, he's been atop of the tackles board. He's a guy that I definitely watch for. Man, I'm probably going to mispronounce his name, but Sean Musteen with Green Bay. He's got 16 tackles for a loss. He's a guy that sticks out to me. Travion Banks has been a shutdown corner for Northern Arizona. He's definitely a guy that sticks out as well. Kevin Ransom, also another guy that sticks out a little bit. But moving on to special teams player of the year, a couple different players that you could go with here. Obviously, we just mentioned a few of them, given what we were talking about with overall performances. But looking at the special teams units, who are some guys that you would name?
On top of my list is Ernesto Lacayo out of Duke City. A lot of the reason Duke City has been in the games that they've been in, even though they have the league's worst record, have been because this guy's so versatile. He hits a lot of deuces. He's the king of the drop kick, so they often turn to him to drop kick to get 2 points instead of 1. He's a great kicker on field goals, though he's had some struggles on last-second field goals. But Duke City's they're a team that's put in a position where they have to have last-second long field goals. So even though he's missed some, he's made some that are long distance. So he's at the top of my list. Right behind him, I would say Kyle Kaplan of Quad City, another kicker that's just really good and clutch. He had a game a few weeks back where he was 5 for 5 on field goals, and one of them was like a 46-yard game winner. That's unheard of in indoor football. Just unheard of. The guy is a star. But when we look at like the return game and whatnot, I'm going to mention Lionel McConnell again. He's such a contributor on special teams. But I think that's how you pronounce it, Arzea McCorker out of NAS. He hasn't duplicated his week 1 performance, but he had 2 kick returns for touchdowns in week 1. And, he still contributed greatly in the return game. Man, there's a lot of good guys that I could mention. But those are the ones that stand out to me right now.
Fair enough. No, I honestly, I think you brought up some great examples. In fact, I wanted to throw out there that I thought the kicking in the IFL has been great this year. Honestly, it's been better than the most recent memory. A lot of really big name kickers have come through the league this year. I like that you throw out there Kyle Kaplan. He's leading the league currently in field goals made. He's attempted 23 field goals. We've got 5 different kickers after like 11 games apiece who have attempted 20 or more field goals. I do not remember that in the recent memory with the IFL. So, that's a lot. Like you said, Ernesto Lacayo, he stands out to me because of his ability to drop kicks, deuces as well. Gabriel Ruiz, probably the best kicker in the league at times. Although it's kind of slipped a little bit statistically. A guy like Dawson Evitz, who's actually leading the league in conversion percentage, he definitely makes some sense there. Return game wise, I like that you threw out there Lionel McConnell. Elijah Lilly's another guy that I would definitely shout out.
That's a guy.
Isaiah McCorker is definitely on that list for me. Andre Williams as well, Green Bay. Only played in 3 games, had 253 kick return yards and a touchdown. Pretty impressive. Definitely one of those guys that does a lot with a little. So definitely a guy that I would keep an eye out on. But other than that, I mean, I think that's basically the list there for me. I think it's probably going to end up going to a kicker this season. I could be wrong, but I think that's going to end up be the way they lean.
Yeah, I think you threw out some really good names there. As far as the kicking goes, any one of those kickers that were mentioned could go to the outdoor game right now and succeed. Any one of them.
I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'm surprised that kickers don't go from the indoor game to the outdoor game more often. Because if you think about it, these guys are literally practicing accuracy all year long. You're practicing driving the ball through a 9-foot window. You go outdoors, it's 18 feet. 18 feet.
Yeah.
That's a huge difference. So, I mean, if that's the case, then you would think that outdoor teams will be looking at the indoor kickers for guys all the time, but it doesn't ever seem to be that way.
Yeah, and if I may, Sam, one of the factors that scouts are looking for is how well can they kick outdoors. That's one of the factors they look at. Because you think about the arena game, you're wearing a different type of shoe. Your plant foot lands just a little bit different. Even though the accuracy is a big thing, it's how you play the wind, how your plant foot's, getting down and whatnot. And the reason I say that is because you look at Jake Bates of the Michigan Panthers in the UFL. Sorry, I know this is around the indoor world, but
no, you're good. Do it. I'm proud of you.
They're playing indoor in Ford Field, and Jake Bates in the first 3 weeks has 3 60-yard field goals, right? But when he goes outdoor, he starts missing them, and scouts, and that's nothing against Jake Bates. I think he's a phenomenal kicker, and I think he needs to be playing in the NFL right now. But I think that's what scouts are looking at. But I do also think, now keep in mind, the NFL record for most field goals in a game is held by Rob Baronis of the Tennessee Titans, who hit 8 field goals in a game. Where was he before that? The New York Dragons of the AFL. These guys, they do practice that accuracy. Now, you give anybody 8 attempts in the NFL, they're going to miss one. Okay? But because Rob Baronis had to hone in on that accuracy in the indoor game, when it came his opportunity to attempt 8 field goals in a game, he hit them all. And so, yeah, I think these guys should be playing. If you remember, Ernesto Lacayo in 2020 was playing for the Seattle Dragons, and he was doing well, and then he signed by Arizona the next year. At any given moment, you mentioned Rui, he too could be called up. Some of these return guys could too. They could be called up to be return specialists or whatever in the UFL at any moment, or the CFL. They're athletes through and through.
I agree wholeheartedly. Honestly, if it were me and I was scouting kickers, I'd be looking indoors. I do like that you pointed out that obviously it's how you play the wind and all of that, and that has been a factor in Jake Bates' game, that he hasn't had as much success outdoors. But that's actually why, I'm not sure if you saw this, but he actually signed with the Detroit Lions, or he's expected to sign with the Detroit Lions. So he's going to end up returning to the same field he's playing in for Michigan. So kind of cool to see that.
I'm happy about that.
Definitely. It's cool to see, because honestly, special teams is a big reason why a lot of these guys end up back in the big leagues. Obviously Jake Bates is a recent example. Brandon Aubrey was playing soccer 3 years ago, and now he's in the NFL as a kicker. So kind of cool to see, and I expect more guys to get opportunities.
Yeah.
But anything else IFL related that you'd like to touch on before we get out of here? I know you got a long drive ahead of you.
Yeah. I'd also like to point out that I think the coaching in the IFL has been pretty good this year as well. I've liked a lot of the different plays that I've seen. I've liked seeing coaches that are able to identify a kicker's ability to do the drop kick. It seems like it's being used a lot more. Connor Mangan down there in San Diego is doing it a little bit more. He used to do it for NAS, and there's a couple others that have tried it. And it just seems like coaches are becoming more aware of what their opportunities are and utilizing them at the right moments as well. And I just like seeing that. So when it comes to the IFL product, I think the product itself is getting better too, and I like seeing that. I think it's going to be, I think it's just going to continue to grow and continue to be something that becomes more popular. Because I'll get on those chats during a game sometimes, Sam, and somebody will just pop in and be like, "Oh, whoa, what is this? What am I watching here? Who are these teams? Whoa, they can drop kick for 2 points. That's interesting. Whoa, you can get 2 points by kicking through the goalpost on a kickoff. Whoa, how many ways are there to score in this game?" And they're just intrigued by it. It's a fun game. And I
Yes.
love seeing that, and that it's not just a gimmick that everybody sucks at, to where when somebody just going through and saying, "Oh, that's too gimmicky." Like my brother, who watched a little bit of it and said, "Put a tent over that circus," and he didn't watch enough of it. It's not a circus. When these guys are actually succeeding and knowing these rules, it's so fun to watch.
Yeah. 100%. And I like that you pointed out all the special teams wrinkles and how they score, because honestly, I think that's, in my opinion, every league should adopt the deuce. Every single league, the NFL, CFL,
Yep.
UFL, all of them. Put it in there. I guarantee you'll see more excitement on the kickoff game every week.
Absolutely.
That would be one of the big things that I would say. But honestly, that's part of the excitement about the IFL in particular. Like you said, the drop kicks, 2 points, the rouges, 1 point there, the deuces, 2 points there. It's incredibly hard to make a field goal. Extra points are not routine, so you can't just walk away and go grab a snack during a special teams play, because you might see a kickoff return touchdown, you might see a deuce, you might see a miss. There's so many different factors in terms of taking points away from the game or scoring points in the special teams units in particular, that it's a lot of fun to watch. And we've got a comment here that I love. Enrique Crum says, 8-man football is the best in my opinion. He also says, grind to shine bandits coming soon. Definitely going to be watching out for them. Their developmental team coming up from a agency, grind to shine. So that's always kind of interesting to see. A lot of them popping up over the next couple seasons, it looks like. Any other topics before we get out of here?
One last one on the kicking game in the IFL that I really like, and I think that at some point we're going to see it, and it's going to shock a lot of people that don't know about it, is the 4-point field goal. As these kickers get more familiar with the drop kick, keep in mind that kickers missing field goals or missing PATs sometimes happens because of a bad snap or a bad hold. It's not all on the kicker. And if an offense is struggling, right, and they're down by 4 points close to the end of the game, a coach can look at the offense that's struggling, or their guy that usually snaps the ball is hurt, or the guy that usually holds the ball is hurt. I can totally see a coach going, "Hey, I have more confidence in my kicker hitting a 4-point drop kick than I have in attempting a field goal tie or whatever, or in my offense to score a touchdown for the win." You know what I'm saying? And this is another wrinkle. It's not used very much, but as these kickers get better at the drop kick, I can see it being utilized more, and that's the 4-point drop kick.
I could definitely see that too. I mean, honestly, hopefully it is, because it's just another exciting wrinkle to the game, and once you see those things, it gets talked about at length. We all saw all the hubbub about Albany scoring a 4-point extra point play to win a game a couple weeks ago. Everybody was shocked that was even in the rule book, but it is. So kudos to Albany for reading it front to back and committing all of that to memory and knowing that's a capability for them to do and winning a game because of it. it's stuff like that that makes these games amazing, and it's stuff like that that kind of really makes the coaching stand out. So I mean, we didn't touch on that. Is there a coach of the year candidate for you?
In the IFL?
Mm-hmm.
See my hesitancy? There's too many good ones.
Yeah, exactly. Rob Keefe,
Right now,
Corey Roberson.
Right now, I'm going to throw one out to you that might surprise you. But right now, for me, it's Les Moss out of Northern Arizona. And here's why. Because every single year, he has pretty much a completely different team, a completely different quarterback. And that argument could be made for other teams as well. Don't get me wrong. He comes in with a completely different set of guys after their championship win. They go back to the playoffs, surprise Arizona in the playoffs, and they're in the semifinal. And then the next year, he comes back. Sorry, I'm losing myself here. The next year, he comes back, which is this year.
Uh-oh. Looks like we're seeing some connection issues all of a sudden. Basically what he was getting at is that they've had a great run of success recently, despite the fact that they've changed players often. And if you look in the standings for the IFL right now, and you look across the league, you look at Green Bay, they've got Max Maylor. He was there with Green Bay last season. Frisco's got Larry Harrington and TJ Edwards. Both of those players know that offense very well. Massachusetts, they've got Alejandro Benefield, who started most of the season. He knows that offense very well. Bay Area, they've got Daquan Neal, who's been with Dixie Wooten several times over. And then you look at Vegas, you got Jerome Johnson. He's no rookie when it comes to indoor football. Arizona, Dalton Sneed, same situation. However, you look at NAS, they're the one outlier of all these great teams this season. So great point by you, Ducon. I'm glad you brought that up. But continue what you were saying about Les Moss being coach of the year.
Yeah, sorry about that. Hold on just a second.
Absolutely.
You still with me? Sorry about that, Sam. I dropped the phone because I'm traveling, so I pulled over to finish the thought.
You're good. I appreciate you being so dedicated.
Say again, sorry.
No, I appreciate you coming on despite the fact that you're driving and all that. I mean, just shows your dedication to the sport.
Yeah. So the only thing I was going to mention is in week 1, Arizona came to town and won by 2 scores over NAS. He had Joshua Jones, brand new. He's got a lot of these new players. And Les Moss, he's been very good at evaluating what his team is good at. And he's been very good at game planning, and not just game planning, but making halftime adjustments and in-game adjustments, knowing what their strengths are and utilizing it to the best of their ability. And ever since they lost at San Diego and looked like they might be a team that just misses the playoffs, they've just been finding ways to win at the league's best teams. And their last loss to Bay Area was a 3-point game that they very easily could have won. So to me, Les Moss is just doing an outstanding job at understanding. But I want to mention 2 other coaches, maybe 3. Coach Corey Roberson is also a guy in Green Bay right now that's just really knows what he has and really knows how to utilize it. And I'm going to mention Rob Keefe out of Bay Area. Same type of situation, different personnel coming in, and they're winning. They're finding ways to win. And then the last one that's really stood out to me is Mike Davis of Vegas. He's been 3 years building this team, and he's now looks like he's got the team that he wants. And even though he's had to deal with injuries, each of Vegas's losses, they're 2 of them are overtime. Let me put it that way, and all 3 of them are 1-score games. And Mike Davis has been able to be in every one of those games to where one play would have changed whether it was a win or a loss.
And so I think he's doing a great job down there.
Absolutely. Big firm supporter of everything Mike Davis does in Vegas. He gave my buddy Evan one of his first opportunities to be in the scouting world. So definitely have support for him. Had support from him before that. Obviously, it's not all about that, but definitely super excited to see him in the running and having a great season. Vegas has had a couple off years. Now they're back where they need to be. Les Moss is a great candidate for that job as well. 6-time champion in the running for another championship. Could be his 7th of his career. So definitely he deserves some running in there as well. Enrique, we appreciate all the love. He says, I will love DuCon weekly Bandits reports all 2025. So that's going to be a thing. You're doing weekly reports for the Bandits this season?
Yeah, Sam, I don't know if you're talking to me. I'm really sorry. For some reason, my audio's not working. So I'm going to duck out. I'm sure you can hear me, but I can't hear you all of a sudden. So I'm just going to say this real quick. Thanks for the show. Thanks for the visit. Thanks for putting all of this together and for giving players and coaches in this wonderful sport exposure that can help them take that next step. Always enjoy the time we spend together. And thanks for orchestrating it. It's a lot of work, I'm sure. So I'm going to duck out. But thank you guys. Thanks for everybody that's listening. Thank you to radio partners for airing this for us. And thank you especially to players and coaches and owners that are sacrificing so much to give us fans some wonderful pleasure watching these games. Appreciate it. Peace out.
Absolutely. Have a good night. Thank you, DuCon, for tuning in. Obviously, he is on the road, so having some internet issues as he's going. Again, he's traveling to the NAL Championship game, so stay tuned to his channel. Stay tuned to the National Arena League channel to make sure you catch all of his content coming out. He's doing a weekly show for the National Arena League. It's been awesome to watch, and it looks like he might be doing some weekly Bandits reports in 2025, so stay tuned for that. His channel is ZO Productions on YouTube. Make sure you go subscribe to it right away. He's also on Facebook. Follow him at Arena Football Statement on Facebook. I don't believe he's on Twitter, Instagram, or Twitch. But if you are watching on those channels, do me a solid. Go over to YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to his channel. I guarantee if you like indoor football, you will not be disappointed. Enrique, we really appreciate the support. He says he supports everything that we do as well. We really appreciate that. We will I hope that as well. Real quick word from a couple sponsors, and then we're going to go ahead and get out of here for the day. Appreciate everybody who tuned in. It's been a lot of fun producing this show all season long. I know that a couple of these leagues are wrapping up, and we will be kind of transitioning into more IFL-focused coverage. We'll probably mix in some AFL as well as some TAL to kind of give you some coverage of some other leagues and kind of keep the show going throughout the offseason. We will discuss, eventually when moves start to happen, we'll have some discussion on free agency, trades and stuff like that as they come as well. Although we're quite a ways away from that still as well. With nonstop indoor football all the way till probably August or September, and then other leagues picking up, some tells me we'll have plenty of episodes still coming of this show. So if you're tuning in, we really appreciate all the support. We appreciate when you guys like, comment, all that stuff. It really helps us kind of keep the show flowing, bring topics up and all of that. So thank you once again for everybody who tuned in. Make sure you hit that like button, comment, and if you haven't done so already, yet again, go subscribe to ZO Productions on YouTube. Go subscribe to Shady Sports Network on YouTube, and help us continue to produce great content about this great sport that we love.
I'm just being myself, cool as can be. When I'm being myself, you wish you were me. It's so easy. Get out your own way. It's just so easy.
Shout out to Upside and Estime for Fitness, as well as our other sponsor, D's Place, of this episode. We really appreciate all of these different companies that provide us the opportunities to make a little bit of money with doing what we do without having to charge you guys, the viewers. So make sure you're supporting all these companies. If you like our content, it helps support us without charging you guys for our content, which we will never do. I've said that on several fronts. We are never going to be a service that is asking you to pay us on, Patreon or anything like that. We'll always be available via YouTube. But in order for us to be able to do that, we need your support through companies like that, like Estime for Fitness, where you can go use our content or our code, save yourself a little bit of money and also support us in the process while supporting an athlete-run company, which we're always about. Kevin Estime is somebody who I firmly believe anybody who's an athlete should go follow, learn from his example, and realize that you can build a brand off of your name if you're intelligent and you take action. He's been an inspiration to me building this brand, and I think he should be an inspiration to players across every sport. It doesn't matter what league you play in. It doesn't matter what sport you play. Use your name. Monetize the value of yourself. And I know that sounds crazy, but realize your value to the world, because you are more than just, another player. But with that in mind, I really appreciate everybody who tuned in. We'll catch you in the next episode next Saturday, 8 a.m. Eastern.
I'm a game changer. I'm a game changer.